Hey, what's up? It's Troll Pal, Mr. Cook. We just got through the first 9 problems from the test review, and now we're doing the last one, number 10. So this video will do the Hamilton's method and also Jefferson's method. All right, so it says a county has 3 states and 30 seats in the legislature. The population of each state is shown in the table below. So find each state's apportionment using Hamilton's method. Hamilton's method, we have a brief description in the reference sheet. The main things you want to pick up on are that in Hamilton's method, we have to find something called a standard divisor. It's just a formula that we use. And then we use that to divide that into each of the subgroups or the subpopulations. In this case, it would be the states. We divide that into their subpopulations, and then that gives us our modified quota, okay? All right, so or our quota that we get for each of them. All right, so we first need to find the standard divisor in Hamilton's method. So to do that, we need to find the total population. In this case, it's going to be the total population of people in all of the states, and then divide that by the number of items to be allocated. So in this case, it's going to be the number of seats that we're trying to distribute out. And that's like kind of typical to what the question is going to be, how it's going to be phrased. In the first, bit of information, you're going to be given populations. You used to find the total population of whatever. And then you're also going to be given like some things that need to be distributed among all of them proportionally. And so with Hamilton's method, here's how we do it. We first find the standard divisor. So the standard divisor, the way that you find it is by taking the total population. And in this case, it's going to be all these populations added up. So 6933, 9533, 16534. So that total, 33,000. And then we divide into that the things that we're trying to do a lot. So into 30 seats. Okay. So when we divide those out, we use our calculator. 33,000 divided by 30, that should be 1,100. So this is what we call our standard divisor. Once you find the standard divisor, it's really easy to use Hamilton's method. All you have to do is just divide that number, 1,100, into each of these numbers over here. And that'll tell you like your quota for each of them. Then we're going to have to modify it by rounding down and then, go from there. So the first thing that I like to do is just sort of like say, all right, if I have state A, it has, this population, 6933, and I'm going to divide that by my standard quota, 1,100. So if I do that, if I use my calculator, let's see what I get. So 6933 divided by 1,100, and I get this number, 6.3027272773. But here's the deal. I just want to cut it off at 2 decimal places. So if I cut it off right there, the 2 sevens and all that stuff, that 0 right here is going to round down because that number is below 5. So if I round it to just 2 decimal places, I stop at 6.30. Okay, now I'm going to do that for state B and also for state C. Okay, so same steps. So for state B, I take its population, 9533, divided by the standard quota, 1,100. And let's see what I get. So 9533 divided by 1,100. And I get 8.666363636. And so if I want to cut it off at 2 decimal places right there, since this number is above 5, then I round this number up by 1. So I go up to the next number, which would be 7. Okay, so there's our number for that one. Now C, I take the population for that one, so 16,534, and divide it by 1,100. And let's see what I get for this one. So using my calculator, 16,534 divided by 1,100. And that's going to be 15.03090909. So if I want to cut it off at 2 decimal places, since that number is not 5 or above, I just leave it as a 3. I don't have to round up or anything like that. Okay, so what these are called are the quotas for each of the states. But obviously, if I'm giving out seats in a legislator, I can't give out like 0.3 of a seat, 0.30 of a seat. So what I need to do is basically cut off all the decimal values. I do something essentially called rounding down. So that means that for state A, if I have 6.30, I just cut off the decimal value and I'm just left with 6 seats. And if I cut off the decimal value for the rest of them for state B, I just have 8 seats if I get rid of the decimal. And then for state C, if I take off the decimal, I just have 15 seats. Now, what you need to do is make sure that this adds up to 30 seats, okay? So if I add them all up, 6 plus 8 plus 15, what I get is 29. And notice that I wanted 30 seats to be given out, right? So since I only have 29, I have 1 extra. And if I have any extras, then what I do is I look for the decimal value, okay, that is the highest. So in this case, state B has the highest decimal value. And so that means that I'm going to add that 1 extra onto the 8 seats. So that means that they're going to get 9 seats in total. Now, let's say, all right, just for whatever's sake, that there was 28 somehow. That means that I was missing like 2 seats, so 2 extra seats. What I would do is I would go to the highest decimal value and give them an additional 1. Okay, so give them 9. And then I go to the next highest decimal, which would be this one, and add 1 onto that too. That's only if I had 2 extra seats, but I only had 1. That's why that extra seat only goes to state B. Okay, now if I add these up, 6 plus 9 plus 15, that's going to be 30. And that's good because that's all 30 of the seats that I wanted to break apart. Okay, so this is Hamilton's method. All I have to do is add that last one on there to make 30. Okay, now for Jefferson's method. For Jefferson's method, it's basically the same thing except for one difference. You're going to be given what we call a modified divisor, okay? So a modified divisor is a bit different, okay? It's actually not something that you are going to calculate. You're going to be given that value, okay? So if I look over on my reference sheet, the modified divisor is always less than the standard divisor. So we just found the standard divisor, 1100. So like, let's say this is on a test, you'd be given a number to then use as your divisor in the same thing. So in other words, like with the Jefferson's method, you basically do the same thing as Hamilton's method. It's just that instead of like calculating the standard divisor, like what we did here, you're just going to be given that number, okay? So if you're given it on the test, you'll be given some number that's close to it, like maybe 1050 or something. Since we don't have any direction on this problem for the test review, we're just going to make one up. Let's say that it's like 1080, okay? So 1080 is the number that we're going to use just for fun. So it's a little bit less than 1100. Let's see if that makes a big difference. All right, so if I take state A and I take the total 6933 and divide by 1080, let's see what I end up with. So using the same calculator options, just dividing, I get 6.4194444. So if I want to cut it off at 2 decimal places, since this one's higher than 5, I'm going to add 1 onto that little 2 there, so make it a 42 instead. Round it up. Okay, and then state B, they had 9533, I think, right? Yeah. Divide by 1080. Let's see what number I get there. So 9533 divided by 1080. I got 8.826851852. So if I want to cut it off at 2 decimal places, since this number is more than 5, I'm going to add 1 onto that. So I'm going to round up and turn that into a 3. And then for state C, so that was 16,534. If I divide that by 1080, let's see what we end up with. So 16,534 divided by 1080 gives me 15.309259, blah, blah. Okay, so like if I cut it off at 2 decimal places, since that's more than 5, I'm going to add 1 onto this number at the very end. So if I add 1 onto 0, I get a 1. Okay, so these are my quotas. Now I'm going to round down. So if I round down for this, then that means that A would get 6 seats, B would get 8 seats, and C would get 15 seats. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing where I count up the total. So 6 and 8 and 15. That gives me 29 again. So that means that I have 1 extra seat that's floating around. And I do the same thing. I just look for the number with the highest decimal place. So in this case, it's the 0.83. and I add that one extra onto there. So I'm going to give it 9 seats now. Okay, and that's Jefferson's method. The only difference, again, is that you're going to be given the divisor instead of needing to calculate it like you did in Hamilton's method. Okay, so that's all through the test review. I hope you found this really helpful. If you didn't, go get help from your college math teacher. I'm Mr. Cook. If you need some help from me, I'll be available before or after school. Just find me, and I'll do what I can to help you out. All right, thank you very much for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.